Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today, we have Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
Doing fine, doing fine.
Good. We're back in the saddle.
But the wars are still going on.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
But we're having a conference, and we're going to dispose of all those wars. We're going to tell people none of it's necessary.
Yeah,
Since World War II, we shouldn't have lost one person in battle.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't have killed anybody, no innocent people. But we're leading to a typical Roman bankruptcy and the destruction of an empire.
Yep.
So you got to get the people prepared. And I'd like to help them prepare how this thing ends, to replace it with something and follow up on the dream of the founders. They had a pretty good start, but we could do a couple things in there that might make it a little bit better. But anyway, the best we can do now is talk about and try to warn the people what's going on, because there is news. I mean, one day we think the Ukrainians better surrender and just go home, and Americans ought to go home, because in Europe they're getting tired of us, because they say, why do we have these wars? For the Americans to make all this money, and they're getting tired of it. But anyway, in the meantime, the Ukrainians aren't bashful. They're very aggressive in stealing money from the American taxpayer, and they now have to have a pretense that they're doing a pretty good job at handling these Russians. Yeah. So the headline has been about the invasion, so-called invasion, and it is an invasion. The Ukrainians went into Russia. Yeah. You'd think the Russians would get annoyed. Believe me, I think they're annoyed, but they're just holding back until they make their decision when it becomes necessary. I'm sure they will. But the headline in Anti-War today is, NATO countries think Ukraine won't be able to hold the territory in Russia's Kursk. Yeah, which is not a most insightful thing to say, because most people don't think that they can hold it. Yeah. But they still. Well, why do they do it? Well, I think the Ukrainians are willing to quit. They're asking for peace treaties, and they're just sort of trying to get a better edge. At the end of a war, they say, well, there's going to be a war. There's going to be a settlement. Let's see if we can get 100 yards. 100 yards more and put it on our side, and that's what they claim. So the Ukrainians aren't pretending, or at least they're not hesitating to leak it out, that they have no intention on winning this war, and there's no reason why they should or could. But but it's a big deal when you think about, what does this mean for NATO? Hopefully it weakens NATO, but. It's going to be maintained and increased for a while longer. As long as people take our dollars, we're going to do it. We're not going to give up on spending this money and stirring up trouble, because you have to have the trouble to justify taking and stealing all the money from the American people. And yet the American people should finally realize that this is related. When you take the money out of the pockets of American citizens, then you devalue the currency and all their prices go up. This is related. So this is the reason that people should pay a lot of attention to foreign policy if they're interested in the economic mess we have. Yeah. And there's going to be a lot of opportunity for trying to iron out this mess and get a good alternative to what we have.
Yeah, it's a really strange situation, Dr. Paul, and nobody really seems to understand what's happening. If we can put up that first clip, this is from our friends at antiwar.com, Dave DeCamp. Who writes about it. NATO countries think Ukraine won't be able to hold territory in Russia's Kursk, as you read, Dr. Paul. Now this, we've talked about it last week, or maybe it was even on Monday that we talked about the fact that the Ukrainians had a kind of a surprise attack in the Kursk region. They have captured a not insignificant amount of territory there. But the question is, what was the goal? What is the goal? Is it to hold part of Russia? Well, that's not going to happen. But what's interesting about it, I think, and one of the reasons why we wanted to bring it up this morning, is the strange reaction of the U.S. and NATO and the Europeans. Because on the one hand, you'd think they would be encouraging, this is fantastic, we're all behind it, giving them a taste of their own medicine. They invaded Ukraine, so Ukraine's going to invade Russia. But something strange is happening, which is the opposite. Now, let's go to the next one because this is from the article, I think. This will give you a little taste of how much territory, and it's not significant in terms of Russia's vastness, but you can see that red squiggly line, that's the border. And so the blue that spilled over into the Kursk region is the Ukrainians who are holding the land, but they're also, according to a lot of observers, dying in great numbers as well. But here's the sort of the narrative that's being put out in the West, Dr. Paul. Go to the next one. This is from military.com, and it captures the essence of, I think, the narrative that they're developing over this. Ukraine's Kursk attack surprised Russia and perhaps some of its backers. Whoa, we're surprised. Go to the next one. Now here's General Pat Ryder, who is the spokesman for the Pentagon. He says, basically, we didn't know anything about it. The U.S. is distancing itself from this. U.S. defense spokesman Patrick Ryder, on not knowing the goals of the attack, he says, this is really something the Ukrainians should be talking about. I would refer to you to them to tell about their operations. We're in contact with our Ukrainian colleagues to get additional details, but I have nothing beyond that. And one final thing, Dr. Paul, is, and I didn't make a clip of it, but in Brussels, European Commission spokesman Nabila Masarali also declined to go into detail, saying the European Union is not involved, not commenting on the operational developments on the front line. So everyone is washing their hands of this operation, yet it's still hard to believe that Ukraine struck at the perfect time, from at least the reports that I've seen, Dr. Paul, that there had been some demining going on around that border because the Russians were getting ready to go in over that border. The border area was very, very lightly guarded by conscripts. These weren't heavy forces. And so Ukraine did strike at the perfect moment to take a lot of land and at the very least give Putin a black eye and an embarrassment. So we're expected to believe they did that without any intelligence assistance from the U.S. and NATO.
That would tell you they're not too smart on their intelligence, but they're not too smart on policy. That's the big deal. But, you know, our friend Dave DeCamp wrote that article that we've been quoting, and he has a quote here about what Putin said. But when I read it at first, it says Biden called Ukraine ground invasion in Kursk a real dilemma. And I thought, it is a real dilemma. But then he says, for Putin. So that's what Biden says. What's Biden's job now? What is he doing?
I don't know what he's doing. He's on the beach again, probably.
Well, I do know that Pelosi's still around, and she's still giving a lot of advice.
Yeah, she is.
At least pretending. So, no, it is a real mess, and I don't. It's probably it has gotten the attention of Putin, but I wouldn't describe it that this was a big deal, and now Putin has a real dilemma. I think he's trying to accomplish his policy without while keeping it from expanding out of control for everybody. But I think the one thing is that some of the Europeans are getting sick and tired of this. And that would be a healthy sign, because they can't threaten to take their money away because it's all our money. And it's NATO, and we direct NATO. So that's not going to work. But I think when the Europeans get tired of it, they can't give any support or a pretense of it, and that might weaken the resolve of our warmongers, except I think there's a senator that we might have to talk to first about what the position should be.
Well, I'm going to put that on in a second, but I would just mention that not only the Europeans are getting tired, but Trump is getting tired of it. You know, we haven't talked about, and we're not going to talk about it today, but it's a significant event, which is where Trump appeared with Elon Musk on Twitter X. And that was, Elon tweeted out that it's been seen by a total of 1 billion people, or 1 billion views combined on Twitter. So that's significant. And I did not listen to the whole thing yet. I'm going to hope to listen to some of it. But apparently, and I did hear the part where Trump said, you know, basically Biden did everything completely wrong. He told Ukraine they should get in NATO. That's a stupid idea. I never would have done that. So it shows you that he's at least thinking on different terms. He's not going to continue the Biden policy if he's elected. And I think that might explain why you're seeing some of these bold moves on the part of Ukraine, maybe with the help of of NATO or NATO troops. But it does, like you say, it's not going to defeat Russia, but it does make Putin look bad. You can't even guard your own doorstep. You've got Ukrainian troops killing Russians in Russia, and it could cause some unrest in Russia. But the senator that you're talking about, so everyone else is saying we had nothing to do with this. I don't know if it's a good idea. There's one person with a different view. Let's put on that clip, and I will warn everyone there's a slight rough word in it, but it's little Lindsey Graham, so it's a little, he just wants to talk tough. So let's go ahead and hear the whole clip. But here's what Lindsey thinks about the Russian incursion, or the Ukrainian incursion inside Russia.
What I think about Kursk, bold, brilliant, beautiful. Keep it up. Putin started this, kick his ass. Let these people fight. Give them weapons they need to win a war they can't afford to lose. When it comes to F-16s, way too long. They're here. Let's use them. Let's train Ukrainian pilots.
So he thinks it's absolutely beautiful that the war is expanding.
The Russian Defense Ministry, made a statement to say that the Russians are doing quite well. You don't know what is all propaganda or what it means. But they were saying that over 2,000 Ukrainians were lost, which is a possibility, but we really don't know for sure. And I keep thinking, well, this will wake these people up. Let's say it's true, because they've lost so much at the expense of some outsiders stirring this up. And you say, why don't the people rebel in Ukraine? Oh, patriotism, that's the reason. But the place that you and I and other Americans have a greater responsibility and greater at stake, and that is, what is our own government doing? We have a moral obligation to say something about our own government. So if this is an insult to Ukrainians, and they don't seem to be doing too much other than we'll do it again, and how do we do it? But it's all done by the American dollar. They wouldn't have done this without our authority. And then they can pretend, oh, we didn't tell them, we didn't give them any intelligence to tell them what to do. So maybe Lindsey Graham is blurting out the official position. This is good. Let's go ahead. Oh boy.
I do think Trump is right, though. I mean, you never know with Trump. But I think it probably wouldn't have happened on his watch. I don't think Trump would have gone along. I mean, the NATO thing was the last straw for Russia. You can't have Ukraine in NATO. And I don't think he would have gone along with it. He blusters about, they would have been scared of me, they wouldn't have dared do it. I think when it comes down to it, he understands this is dumb. Nobody gains from it, So I think he is probably right on that. But I want to do one more thing on this topic before we move on to the next one. And now this is an account that I follow on Twitter X. It's a geopolitical analysis site, Megatron. It's worth following. But I think this is, and I'm going to read a little bit of this because I think what he does here with this post is convey the importance of what's happening. You could say this is just an incursion of Ukraine into Russia, but it's far more significant. And I'm going to tell you why if you leave that up. Here's what he writes. A NATO invasion of nuclear Russia is currently underway, and the world is unaware that it is in World War III. The Kursk region of Russia is currently full of NATO weapons, troops, logistics, etc. Video footage comes out of dozens of NATO vehicles, air defense systems, and so on, destroyed or captured in this region. Putin still refuses to declare war despite the fact that Russia has been invaded and its people killed. Airports across Russia have been constantly bombed for several weeks. Despite the fact that the Russian army is constantly advancing in the Donbass, on its territory it receives heavy and painful blows from NATO weapons, NATO communication, NATO logistics, and NATO command. Over 35 countries are investing everything they have in these strikes against Russia. NATO soldiers continue to pour into Ukraine, whom the West likes to call foreign mercenaries. Kursk is full of them. And the other point that he makes, you can just leave that up, but I do want to read this one point that I didn't clip. And this is important, Dr. Paul. About 80 years later, German tanks are again rolling through the Kursk region, where the decisive battle took place. And that is significant. I think Americans don't realize how important World War II still is to Russians because they lost so many people. The idea of German tanks rolling into Kursk, where one of the most dramatic battles of World War II was fought between the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, that is not, you can't fail to understand the importance of that.
You know, there's one statement on here that I wonder about, because I don't know whether it's true or not, or propaganda, but it says over 35 countries are investing everything they have in these strikes against Russia.
Yeah.
That's hard for me to understand, because I see the other side of it, that some of the Europeans, maybe it's the people in the European countries, but the government, but I just, either they don't have much. If the 35 nations were given everything they have, they'd have conquered Russia. but I guess time will tell on how much they've really put in, or how much the anti-war movement will occur in Europe. There's no reason why it shouldn't. They should have memories too.
Yeah.
Nobody won the war. I mean, you know, the boundaries. The Soviet system is gone, and we have an agreement. We'll stay away from them. Here, this is no man's land. We're not going to get near you. Then we go and put the missiles up there, right in their face.
Yeah.
So finding the information, of course, that's part of our responsibility, is trying to find this information, and that's why we look at the various sources.
Well, speaking of crazy things, Dr. Paul, and I know this next story got you hot under the collar, and rightly so. If we can put up that next clip. Now, this is from Zero Hedge. This is experiment gets an F-. Nantucket residents fume over broken wind turbine blade polluting the beaches. Now, I've never been there, Dr. Paul, but they say these are incredibly beautiful beaches up there. If you just do a couple of these clips so people can see what had happened, go to the next one. Now, these massive wind turbines, the size of the Eiffel Tower, collapsed in Nantucket. You can see some of this in the water. It's toxic fiberglass and styrofoam. Do the next one. Now, this is what the beaches look like, the once pristine beaches. And go to the next one really quick. This is the kind of stuff that's there. Deadly toxic fiberglass, all in the name of the green. No oil.
How are they going to clean up? I'll bet they will use hydrocarbons.
Yeah, probably.
To come in. How are they going to pick those pieces up?
Yeah.
Well, what kind of a truck are they going to have? Are they going to land an airplane there? No, airplanes use hydrocarbons too.
Yeah.
They'll build a railroad car. Oh, that does too. Just is a little bit crazy. And then finally, people are starting to say, yeah, and we had this other problem. You never could predict how much wind we'd have. Yeah. We'd have energy off and on all the time. You know, some days of energy was good. We had the wind blowing good. So that is all in there in this message. It was spoken. What always amazed me about this, and there was a major oil man in Texas that had a lot of oil, and he was gun-ho. He's from West Texas. He was gun-ho over wind. And of course, it might have been a little safer out in West Texas than it is on these beaches.
No kidding,
you know, it's just more or less crazy. But it's going to cost a lot of money to clean up, and my guess is that taxpayers will be hit for it, because nothing is done without money, and that usually goes back to the taxpayers. But they got cheap electricity for all this. No, they didn't even get electricity from this. You know,
broken. Yeah.
What about the economic downturn from the bad publicity they're getting?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not going to that beach. Well, I'm going to wait for. Maybe they'll clean it up, and there'll probably be some long-term effect from fiberglass.
Yeah, it's deadly stuff.
Can't tell. So it's just another typical example of a collectivist approach to things. That if you do this, it's not done individually with obeying rules like property rights and contracts and whatever. Get no subsidies from the special interests, and this should be a strong lesson that interventionism and subsidies are horrible.
Yeah.
They cause people to do things they otherwise wouldn't do it. But just inflation is a subsidy because that's easy credit. That means you can get money for 0% for a while,
Yeah.
very low interest rates. At the same time, that causes the malinvestment. If they didn't have that, would they have done this anyway? Because I'm sure, a lot of oil now, fracking got benefits from the government, and yet I think more people are sympathetic to cracking than the others. But anyway, interest rates are a form of subsidies, but this was literally big time subsidies, and the local people who now lost the value of their land and the beach, they probably paid a heavier price than we did. We didn't even watch it, even though we have to watch our shores too.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, this is all in the name of the environment. These are a blight on the landscape, these wind. And I've seen the ones in West Texas. You drive for miles and miles and you see these. And they're absolutely awful. They really irritate me because they kill the birds. Beautiful big eagles, we've talked about it on the show. Slice off the wings. Come on, that's ridiculous. And don't even start about, what about all these huge solar farms, how ugly they are out in the middle of a beautiful desert somewhere. So
kill the trees.
Yeah, kill the trees. That's what they do. But speaking of subsidies, though, you wanted me to look this up, and I did, because if you'll skip those two and go to the car and driver one, this is another example of the insanity. Look over here, Dr. Paul, at the car and driver. If you can, this is you were asking me about the tax credit. Now, this is car and driver earlier this year, actually a couple months ago. Here's the EPA's list of electric vehicles eligible for the federal tax credit. They gathered everyone available. You either get almost $4,000, I think, for a used car, or a full $7,500 federal tax credit. Now, we like tax credits, but there's something different about this.
Yeah, it's a lowering of tax and getting people to do things they otherwise wouldn't have done.
Yeah.
It's malinvestment, and all this gets paid for by more fiat, more printing of money, because the money doesn't, because they're making these mistakes, and they're literally, putting out cash. In this case, it means that the taxes go down for them over maybe a car that would, more normal car.
Yeah.
So it does have an effect on it, and it has effect on the budget, and then nobody wants to give up on it, but they're going to have to give up on it, because people can't afford it. The prices of second-hand cars, it's the same thing about electric cars. How much how many subsidies they get cars, and the other ones who got a tremendous subsidies. So now the used electric cars, are the price is way down on that. In this midst of monetary inflation, prices are way down. So that's like a depression. When the prices go down in the midst of runaway inflation, there's something wrong with it. That's a big problem. But it's the principle is the interventionism. Why do we allow politicians use the money of the taxpayers to make these decisions, and that if they make a mistake, look at how much suffering. If you and I were in the business and we make the mistake, you guys weren't too smart. So you have to suffer. But you have, in a free market, you have to pay the penalty for not being smart enough.
Yeah.
But that's the job of the entrepreneurs, to anticipate the marketplaces. But it's practically impossible in many ways to overcome the intervention by regulations and the intervention by one price controller, which is the most evil, and that is the price of money. And they have to make all these calculations, and when they get into trouble, the only tool they have to try to smooth things off and to handle the prices and that has spread to the whole economy is price controls, and they try that and make things worse. But right now, the car industry is suffering from that. But the whole thing is the subsidies and the decision making by politicians is really pretty dumb, except for the people who on the short run make a lot of money.
Yep.
On the short run, they some will do well and say, I got rich on this one.
Yeah. Everyone else doesn't. Well, anyway, I think if we covered that, do you have some more on that, or do you want to close out? Or?
I'm ready to go.
All right, let's roll out. If you can put that very last one on, I'm going to remind everyone we are just over 2 weeks out from the Ron Paul Institute's Washington Conference. It's going to be a great event. If You can put that last one up. I've got the link in the description to the Liberty platform. There we go. The Liberty platform. We are going to have now. I was just working on the program over the past couple of days, Dr. Paul. We're going to have 9 speakers that day. 9 speakers, and I'm a little selfish, Dr. Paul. I always like to design a conference the way that I like to go, and I like hearing the intellectuals speak, but I don't want to sit for 3 or 4 hours and listen to a long lecture. So I like a lot of short-ish speeches. So we have 9 people. They're each going to give a different perspective. We've got food freedom. We've got medical freedom. We've got freedom of speech with Jonathan Turley. We're exploring all the aspects of what the Liberty platform would look like, and we're doing it with short-ish, punchy-ish speeches. And I think that's what keeps things interesting. So if you agree with me and you want to see a lot of different perspectives, but not have to invest 3 hours in a very long, complicated lecture, this is the conference for you, plus a lot of great people there. So,
well, right now I'm mulling things over in my mind. I haven't sat down and started writing anything because I generally don't do that. But in my mind, I'm mulling over talking at this meeting that we're going to have at our, and that is, I'm trying to nail it down. I want to present 3 things, 3 policies, 3 items that they'll be broad, they'll be generalized. If we did those, the world would be a better place. And it's not complicated. And if people could just diverse themselves from all the mishmash that you do and all your university education and all the PR and the propaganda and the politicians, it would be easy to understand. And in a way, it's what I tried to do during the presidential campaign. And I've tested these 3 things, and I found that young people say, sounds like a good idea. Oh, peace and prosperity, that is good. So I will have, I'll continue to mull that over my mind and present that at our conference. I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.